There's something strange about the way money moves. It's not always about effort. Sometimes it's about energy. She had a lovely garden, lush, green, and full of life. Yet every year, bills piled up, unexpected expenses knocked on the door, and luck always seemed just one step away. It wasn't until an old neighbor, quiet, wise, the kind who speaks only when it matters, walked by and said one line that changed everything. "Your plants are beautiful, but you've planted them like you don't want money to come in." That night, she couldn't sleep. What did that mean? How could flowers and leaves and pots of soil be pushing wealth away? Most people think that just having plants is enough. That green equals good energy. But Feng Shui has always whispered a deeper truth. It's not just what you plant, it's where you plant it. And some places in your garden, if planted wrong, can actually block your prosperity, little by little, year after year. Thank you for coming back to Wisdom of Feng Shui, where nature and intention walk hand in hand. If you've ever felt like you're doing everything right, but abundance still slips through the cracks, leave the word realign in the comments. Because sometimes, all it takes is one small shift to change the way money finds you. In this video, we'll walk through 5 specific garden placements that may be silently disrupting your wealth flow. And more importantly, how to fix them, gently, naturally, without tearing everything up. These are not just tricks. These are energy adjustments rooted in both tradition and real-life stories. Let's start with the first and most common mistake, the one she was making without even realizing it. She had placed a tall, leafy tree right in front of her main entrance. It looked protective. It gave shade. It felt safe. But it was slowly doing the one thing no one talks about, blocking the path of opportunity. In Feng Shui, the front gate or main entrance is known as the mouth of qi, the place where energy, luck, and wealth are invited in. A tree placed directly in front acts like a bouncer, turning away the guests you've been praying for. The fix? It's simpler than most think. Shift the tree slightly to the left or right of the entrance, making sure the view from outside in remains open and inviting. If the tree is too large to move, you can trim the lower branches to lift the energy upward. Some even place a wind chime near the entrance to reawaken the flow. It's not about removing beauty. It's about choosing where beauty becomes support, not resistance. Because when energy enters freely, life responds softly, and so does your bank account. She didn't mean to block her own blessings. No one ever does. The tree in front of her gate had been there for years. She planted it herself on a summer afternoon, thinking of shade, beauty, and a little privacy. And in many ways, it gave her that. But it also gave something else, something she couldn't name at first, a heaviness. Visitors rarely lingered at the front, deliveries got missed, job offers faded, clients hesitated. She chalked it up to bad timing. But in truth, the tree was quietly doing what even she couldn't admit, closing the door on possibility. In Feng Shui, the front entrance is sacred. It's not just the way people walk in, it's how energy recognizes you. It's how wealth finds your home. When something dense and unmoving sits directly in its path, it disrupts that recognition. It confuses the flow. It sends a signal that says, "Not now, not ready." That's not the message she meant to send, but energy listens to placement more than intention. This kind of mistake is common, especially for those who crave safety. People who have been burned by loss, by betrayal, by sudden change. A tall tree feels like armor, like control, but in Feng Shui, control that blocks is still resistance. The garden was meant to breathe, to invite, to welcome, not to guard like a fortress. The good news is she didn't need to chop the tree down. She only needed to adjust the posture of her space. Step 1. Clear a visible path from the gate to the front door. Nothing should stand in direct line. Even a potted plant can cause resistance if it feels visually heavy. Step 2. Balance. If the tree must stay, mirror its presence with an open flow on the other side. Create symmetry. Add movement, a hanging bell, a soft light, something that says this house is alive. Step 3. Invite. She placed a small golden toad at the base of the tree, facing the door, and lit a candle nearby for 9 days. It wasn't superstition, it was an act of awareness. A gesture that said, I see what was blocked, and I choose to open. And slowly the flow returned, not all at once, but small things. A check came earlier than expected. Her sister called after months of silence. The neighbor who made that quiet comment, he brought her a lemon tree sapling with a wink and said, "This one brings luck if you plant it with care." The next mistake took a little longer to notice because it was behind her, not in front. Most people focus so much on where energy enters, they forget where it leaks out. Her back door, small, tucked away, mostly unused, had a creeping vine planted right beside it. It was beautiful in a wild sort of way. But over time, that vine had grown thick and tangled, curling around the frame like a hand pulling outward. And just like that, energy wasn't just being blocked, it was being pulled away. Quietly, constantly. She always thought the back door didn't matter. No one used it. It faced a quiet alley. But energy doesn't care how often a door is opened, it only cares that it's there. And for years, her back door had become a silent drain. The vine she planted there had started small, just a bit of greenery to soften the corner. But vines are funny. They don't ask for permission. They grow where they want. And this one wrapped itself around the frame, crawled up the hinges, and slowly began pulling the door open in ways she couldn't see. Bills grew heavier. Sleep got shorter. The feeling of calm that used to fill her home became thinner, more fragile. Until one morning, she walked past the back and felt it in her body, a sense that something was escaping, something she hadn't meant to lose. In Feng Shui, the back door represents exit. It's the outflow point for energy, especially wealth, support, and rest. When it's unbalanced, open, or overwhelmed by growth, it creates a leak. One that doesn't shout, but drains quietly. A back door tangled in heavy plants sends a message. There's no boundary here. Take what you want. And life responds. Energy flows out before it has a chance to settle in. The people most likely to overlook this are the givers. The ones who say yes too much, carry burdens too long, and keep the peace even when it costs them. She was one of them, always offering, always showing up. But her garden was reflecting what she couldn't say out loud, that she was tired and things kept slipping through her fingers. She didn't need to seal the door shut. That wasn't the point. She needed to create a gentle boundary. The fix began with clearing the overgrowth, just enough to let the door breathe again. Then, she placed 2 small pots on either side with grounding plants, low, wide, and firm like jade or peace lily. She lined the inside of the door frame with a strip of soft red paper to hold the energy. And the most important step, she put a tiny mirror, no bigger than her palm, just above the door facing inward, not to reflect out, but to remind the house what it's keeping. These rituals may seem small, but in Feng Shui, intention plus placement equals shift, and she felt it. Her sleep grew deeper. She stopped saying yes to everything. She raised her rates without apologizing. And one night, sitting near that same back door, she caught herself smiling for no reason. That's how healing sneaks in, quietly, like the way energy used to leave. If any part of your home feels like it's slowly draining you, take a walk today, front to back, and really look. Not with judgment, but with clarity. And if you're someone who often puts others first, leave the word return in the comments, because your energy deserves to come back home too. The next mistake wasn't about what was planted, but what was being blocked, something people often do without realizing: blocking the light, especially in the south-facing part of the garden where the heart of the fire element lives. She had planted a row of dense evergreens along the south fence. It looked neat. It gave privacy. But it also did something Feng Shui always warns against. It snuffed out the light that was trying to come in. Some silence doesn't come from sound, it comes from shadows. The garden had grown quiet in a different way. The front was open now, the back was calm. But something still felt dim, not sad exactly, but dulled. Like the spark of the home had softened, and no one knew why. It wasn't until late one afternoon, when the light fell just right, that she finally saw it. The south side of the garden, the one closest to the sun, was shaded completely by a wall of evergreen trees. They had been planted for privacy, tall and proud. But they'd grown dense, unmoving, and in doing so, they had taken something sacred, the fire. In Feng Shui, the south sector is ruled by the fire element. It governs clarity, visibility, reputation, how the world sees you, and how you see yourself. When that light is blocked, people don't just lose motivation. They lose direction. They stop being seen. And slowly, without realizing, they start to dim themselves too. That's what had been happening. Her confidence waned. Invitations stopped coming. Her voice in meetings, once steady, became small. She wasn't hiding. She was fading. This kind of mistake is made by people who once felt too exposed. People who have been talked about, judged, misunderstood. So they build walls, not just to keep others out, but to keep their own light in. The trees made her feel safe. But safety isn't the same as thriving. And when the light can't get in, nothing inside can fully grow. She didn't need to tear it all down. She just needed to let the fire breathe again. The first thing she did was thin the tree line, not remove it, just soften it. She created small openings between the trunks to let sunlight cut through, just enough to touch the soil. Then she planted red salvia and marigolds, flowers that feed fire with color and warmth. She added a small clay lantern, not to burn, but to hold a tea light each evening, just for a few minutes, as a way to say, "I'm ready to be seen again." And slowly, she was. Neighbors began greeting her more often. She got invited to speak at an event she'd never thought she was qualified for. She started dressing in color again, not to impress anyone, just because it felt like her. The warmth returned, not in heat, but in spirit. But even with the light flowing back, something still felt cluttered. Not heavy, not blocked, just noisy. The kind of noise that doesn't make sound but crowds your head. It came not from one tree or one vine, but from the way everything was growing at once. And that's where the real chaos lived. The mess didn't look like a mess at first. It looked alive, colorful, overgrown in that romantic, Pinterest sort of way. There were ferns brushing against citrus trees, succulents next to climbing ivy, tall stalks swaying over tiny herbs. It was wild, textured, lush. But standing in the middle of it, she didn't feel held. She felt dizzy. And underneath that, a little ashamed. Because for all the life around her, her own felt scrambled. In Feng Shui, clutter isn't always about objects. Sometimes it's energetic clutter, when too many elements are thrown together without rhythm or purpose. The garden, like the home, needs structure to breathe, a space for each layer to rise and fall, like a melody. But when tall mixes with short, wet clashes with dry, and wood tangles with metal, something in the nervous system tightens. It becomes hard to think clearly, hard to rest, hard to move forward without second guessing. She realized she was gardening the way she was living, doing too much, too fast, all at once. Her days were full of tasks. Her mind was never still. Even her joy felt rushed, as if it had to earn its place. The garden was a mirror, and what it showed her was simple. Just because it grows doesn't mean it flows. The fix wasn't about removing plants. It was about restoring layers. She stepped back and mapped out the space with her eyes first. What's tall? What's middle? What's ground? Then she began grouping by texture and temperament. The delicate herbs were given a low, sunny bed. The bold, climbing plants were given a frame so they could rise without smothering. She placed a small stone bench at the edge, not in the middle, but off to one side, because not everything needs to be centered to matter. She also added one small water bowl, tucked under a shade plant, to remind herself that rest is part of the flow. That stillness is a form of strength too, and something shifted, not in the garden, but in her. Her mornings slowed. Her emails lost urgency. Her laughter came more easily, even when the day wasn't perfect. Because when the energy around you is allowed to breathe, it teaches your body to do the same. But something still lingered. A question, quiet but persistent. Why had she followed so many planting tips that didn't feel right to her in the first place? Why had she copied layouts from magazines, used colors that didn't suit her, followed advice from people who didn't even know her space? And that's when it hit her. The last mistake wasn't about placement, it was about permission. She had spent so much time trying to do it right, watching tutorials, reading what experts said, copying layouts from people with different climates, different soil, different lives. Somewhere along the way, she stopped asking the most important question: does this feel like me? That question terrified her more than she expected, because deep down, she realized the answer had been no for a long time. In Feng Shui, energy thrives when it's personal. The garden isn't meant to look like anyone else's. It's meant to respond to the life that moves through it, to the person who wakes up to it every morning, who touches the leaves, who feels the wind. When we follow advice without checking in with ourselves, we end up building spaces that might look correct, but feel disconnected. And disconnection is its own form of stagnation. She had chosen plants because they were said to attract wealth, but they made her feel uneasy. She had followed colors that clashed with her mood. She had ignored her own instincts in favor of trend. The result wasn't ugly. It was empty. And the energy around it, soft, hesitant, confused, reflected that. The mistake wasn't ignorance. It was overtrust. Trusting strangers more than her own body. Trusting the general more than the specific. It's what happens to people who have been told too often they're not the expert of their own life. People who grew up second-guessing their voice. She had been taught to seek permission. And her garden, as beautiful as it seemed, had been planted with other people's voices. The healing began when she stood in the center of it all and whispered the simplest thing: I get to choose now. And from that moment, everything changed. She removed the plant she never liked, but kept because someone told her it was lucky. She added jasmine because the smell reminded her of her grandmother's balcony. She brought in a cracked terracotta pot from her childhood home, not because it was Feng Shui perfect, but because it held love. She stopped trying to fix what wasn't broken, and in doing so, the space finally felt like it belonged to her. That's the hidden truth of abundance. Wealth doesn't just come to those who chase it. It comes to those who align, not with rules, but with resonance. A garden can only invite prosperity when it reflects authenticity, not perfection, not approval, just truth. And her truth was soft, a little wild, not quite symmetrical, but deeply hers. The kind of space where money, love, and peace didn't feel like guests, they felt like residents. She didn't need more tips. She needed to come home to herself. And when she did, everything started to grow. Not because it was planted right, but because it was finally rooted in something real. And maybe that's the quiet secret no one tells you. Your garden doesn't need to impress anyone. It just needs to understand you. The soil holds more than roots. It holds memory. It holds decisions. And sometimes, when you finally plant with your own hands, not someone else's words, that's when money knows where to land. Not like a jackpot, but like stability, like ease, like waking up and realizing you don't feel behind anymore. If you haven't watched the video on 5 plants that bring money every morning, go back and catch it when you can. It'll make everything we talked about today feel even more alive. Because placement is power. But the plants themselves, they carry intention too. Thank you for spending this time here, sharing this little walk through her story, and maybe, quietly, through your own. If something in today's video made you pause, even just once, that's already a shift. And if you're still here, still listening, just know, the garden isn't finished. Some chapters bloom later. Some roots go deeper before they rise. See you somewhere in the next story. Your space speaks. Wisdom, listen.